Hello! Welcome back to More Fun Making It and episode 2 of this Atari Triple Restoration and Repair series. My name is Lee. Apologies for the gap, I managed to catch the world-eating lurgy. Today I want to share with you Atari 2600 number 2, or the Charity Atari. This console was very kindly donated by Matt at GothMogPlays off of Twitter. It has some problems. The power switch doesn't work reliably, and the controller ports don't work even a bit. The case is a little beaten up in places, with one corner missing at the front, but the aim is to sell this for charity at Matt's request, so we need to make this work and look as pretty as possible. Having a peek inside, it appears, unlike the last Atari, this one hasn't been worked on before. There's plenty of grime and dust inside, we'll need to take care of that. The current situation is it will actually power on and display a really nice picture over RF. And as I mentioned, that's as far as you can get without working controller ports. This power switch is a problem. Could be dry solder or just a worn switch, or maybe both. Remember how I said it doesn't look like it's ever been worked on before? Well, the solder on this power switch tells a different story. Soldered with a hot spoon, probably, using lead off the local church roof. Probably a good place to start. I'm really not sure what this solder is composed of, so removing it before a reflow seems like a solid plan. My trusty old manual solder sucker always gets the rubbish jobs. It works pretty well and handles big globs of solder with ease. A small hint here for you, spray a touch of WD-40 inside this type of solder sucker. It makes it work like new again. Behind my camera blocking hand, I'm removing some of the burnt residue that was left behind, probably by the previous attempt at repair using too hot an iron or a blowtorch. I don't know what that is. I don't think copper goes mouldy. Probably accidental burning from the Gorilla solderer. We can just hope they didn't mess around with anything inside the main board. Doesn't look like they did, which is just as well. The traces in here are much more delicate than the switchboard section. Something you'll see when I get round to releasing episode 3, the trash bag Atari. Coming sometime this decade. But there is a problem. These points here are where the controller ports are soldered onto the board, and you can't quite see, but the pins are barely making contact with the solder they're supposed to be attached to. Let's go closer. Can you see the problem now? I'm no electronics engineer, but I know electricity doesn't work this way. That crater-filled mess is controller port number 1. This is player 2, which doesn't really look that bad apart from 1 or 2 pins. But this one doesn't work either. A splosh of flux to help the solder flow into a nice shape around the pin. Adding extra solder to give it a chance of standing up to the strain of plugs being yanked out. This row of pins here is the connector for the main board, and some of these are cracked and dry too. Hopefully we now have a fully functional Atari, albeit one with RF output and 40-year-old capacitors. Ah, well, it looks like Warp Block might be a paddle game. I've plugged in my Uno cart, a brilliant device which will be included as part of the charity bundle. We seem to have a working joystick. Marvellous. And apart from me being terrible at Atari Mario Brothers, we have a fully working machine. I better try Space Invaders, as that's my go-to Atari game. I'm used to how it looks and feels, so it's good to use as a test. Oh, indeed. There's something wrong with some of these switches. Time for a closer look. Well, it seems the Gorilla didn't make it to the other switches. It's a wonder this worked at all. Most of them look bad, so I might as well reflow all of them. I'm being so thorough, I'm even reflowing my own work. In fact, I'm just adding a little bit more solder to give this some extra strength. So maybe Warp Block is a joystick game and I just couldn't start it without the game reset switch. No, it's a paddle game. And terrible. Back to Space Invaders, and how amazing does that look even on a nasty portable LCD? As you can see, this case is in a sorry state. The corner is broken off here. But fortunately, my RetroTech, or @Bobus74 on Twitter, offered to send a replacement case along with a couple of boxed cartridges to add to the auction. More on those later. The case he sent is in excellent condition, although I didn't spot this broken screw post and this split one to begin with. Not a problem, that part unclips from the case and I swapped it with one of the other panels. As with the last episode, I'll be converting this to a composite output. It doesn't look as good as RF on a good CRT, but those are getting more and more rare. The mod is non-destructive and fully reversible, so the eventual owner will be able to revert it back to RF if they wish. The board is a little extra grubby, and with it being intended for a charity auction, I'd like it to be pristine, so everything is getting a good cleaning Gadget UK style. In fact, I decided to take it the next level and bring battery power to the mix. Sorry about that. Something I found with IPA and toothbrush cleaning of grubby circuit boards is the grubby part of the mix tends to gather in the toothbrush. It's actually quite important to try and soak up some of this from the board with a paper towel or cloth. For this reason, I'm using 70% IPA instead of the usual 99%. It doesn't dry out as fast, which gives you time to mop up the goop. The lower board is next. With lots more fragile components packed onto the top of this board, I have to be a little more careful. Right, cleaning of the board's complete. Time to put some new bits in and fix the broken parts. I won't bore you too much with a detailed explanation. Recapping these is very straightforward, and you've hopefully already watched me do this stuff in the last episode. You did watch the last episode, right? Right? One small change from the last one on recommendation. Cheers, Lee Smith. I bought a pack of these miniature polyester box capacitors to replace the chiclet type. I'll put a link to the eBay listing in the description. Apologies if you're watching this 3 years from now when all links are broken. I'm sure you'll find some in the future. These parts are now surplus to requirement due to the composite mod and need to be removed from the board. A wire for the sound. This will be attached to the socket I'll be installing at the back of the Atari. A quick test of Space Invaders. The picture quality of this machine, despite being refurbished in exactly the same way as the first one, is far better. They're not all built equal. Getting one with good picture quality is a bit of a lottery. Terrible shot, noob. The voltage regulator and another small capacitor need swapping out. Well, they're probably fine, but I'm swapping them anyway. Mostly for something to do. A quick tidy up of the old thermal grease, again with IPA. A little hint, if you come across a thermal compound that won't move with IPA, try methylated or white spirits, but don't forget to clean that off too. This Atari really is in very good condition, but because it's destined to be sold for charity, and I'd hate for it to pop a cap in itself. Is that a thing? In 6 months' time. This desolder braid is really bad. It's lasted me for a long time, but it's almost finished. I can say I've since replaced it with some much nicer braid now and wish I'd replaced it sooner. I'll put a link in the description for the new stuff, which is excellent. Yes, once again, I'm replacing an axial cap with a radial. If someone wants to send me an axial cap for this board, I'll happily swap it, assuming it's still here. But these are really good quality caps, so are all the other ones in this refurb. No heat shrink is required on the long leg running along the board here. There's no chance of it shorting on anything. And that's all the parts swapped on the switchboard. On the main board, the long leg of the cap is a potential short risk, so a piece of heat shrink tubing to insulate the leg is appropriate. Pulling the cap out like this is my preferred method, but it should be done carefully. The bent end of the leg coming out of the hole can easily tear the pad from the board if you're too rough. Wiggle it free without too much pressure. This hole doesn't want to clear. An easier way is to hold the board in a vise and heat it from one side with the solder sucker in the other. Another way around this is to flow the solder in the joint and just poke the leg of the new cap into it. It's a bit cheaty. The hole still isn't clear. That big thick trace is sucking the heat from my iron and making the solder difficult to get out. Here's that heat shrink tubing to protect the long leg from shorting on any of the nearby components or traces. Testing time. It's sensible to test regularly when changing lots of components. Then when you mess something up, it's easier to track it down. Pac-Man to test the cap install. Look up and down, you strange little yellow dude. The power switch is still intermittently faulty and needs attention. These aren't too difficult to take apart, but there are small springy bits of metal inside that have to go back in the same way once cleaned. The metal tabs under the sides of the switch need to be bent away to allow the body to be removed. They're quite tough to shift. What you're watching here is a wrestling match and I'm going to win. My will is strong. Told you. This is the part that makes the connection. When the spring part loses tension, that connection can become flaky. Some mild oxidization needs to be cleaned off, and then a small bend to restore good contact. Whilst we have this switch apart, it would be a good time to give it a clean. I'm using some 000 wire wool plus some polishing compound and rubbing with the textured ribs. I think that looks lots better. The legs still need a little straightening before it goes back together. I almost forgot the other side of the contacts. These look pretty cruddy, so out comes the glass fibre pencil. You can see the difference in the tops of these contact pads. The outside ones to the left and right are not worn, still a nice peak there, but the middle ones have worn down quite a lot. This would have been contributing to the dodgy connection. Hopefully the clean up and refreshing the bend in the spring part will cure it. And finally, a little lubrication. Now the tricky bit. Taking things apart is always easy. Putting them back, that's a different set of skills. Don't worry, I can see just about as well as you can. There's also a camera in my face. Nice. The power switch looks odd being so clean and shiny, so the others will need a polish and a buff. All the other switches work fine and taking them apart is a pain, so a clean with contact cleaner and compressed air and some lubrication will do for them. This front bezel part has a few dings around the raised edge, nothing terrible. A polish with 2000 grit paper takes the worst of the dings out and removes the last of the old orange paint, ready for a fresh coat. My first attempt with this was using a normal piece of sponge on a stick. The results were as messy as you might expect, and also revealed some more of the imperfections I'd missed the first time round, so I cleaned that off and had another go at making the edge even and ding free. Some slightly more aggressive paper on a handy flat piece of 6mm perspex to take the edge down a little. And then on the other side a piece of 1200 grit to finish the surface. As I'd removed a little of the edge to get rid of the dents, the new edge was very slightly wider. I can't imagine anyone will ever notice though. And the new surface is really nice and flat. Should make painting the orange trim a little easier. This time I'm using a trick my old mucker Real Jam Hamster off Twitter's told me about. Using a dense piece of foam, in this case an old bath toy. You still need to put it on consistently and carefully, but it works much better than a brush in my hands or a normal sponge. I should take a moment to thank all of the people that helped out with this charity project. First of all, Matt at GothMogPlays, who donated the actual machine and the idea to do this. Then we have Phil at PhilBrown15, also from the lovely Retro Gaming Twitter community, who provided me with a couple of Atari joysticks to add to the bundle. At Arcadey, who donated some games, I forget which ones, sorry. And lastly, the amazing at Lee Legion Smith, who not only made in his amazing Lee Smith's workshop the composite mod boards, he also sent me some games to go along with the bundle too. All of them are legends in my eyes, and I hope the auction raises a good chunk of cash for the British Heart Foundation. Another contributor at Cyrotruck donated something that saved me some cash, which he asked me to add to the charity total. I don't remember if I did this here, but it's a really good idea to plug a lead into the socket when you're soldering leads to the back of it. Helps to stop the insides from going all melty. A quick check with continuity to make sure the socket didn't melt. I don't have a DuPont crimp tool. It's on my extremely long list of tools that I want and need. So instead I take a huge amount of time soldering these ends onto the various leads, remembering to put the heat shrink tubing on each one without fail, probably. These leads are all removable to make maintenance easier in the future. That's all the wiring done. The last thing to add to this lovely machine are these new switch grommets, another thing Lee Smith provided. He's a really nice guy. Go and check out his channel, which should appear in the corner now. And here's the final bundle along with all the games I either already had or were donated by the nice people I mentioned before. I hope you've all enjoyed watching this slightly more involved restoration. There was a little more to do with this one than the first. The next episode in this series, you'll meet Trash Bag. Trash Bag now holds a special place in my heart, and I can't wait to show you why. See you all again soon. Bye!